Hey guys, after a long hiatus I am finally back on the DKE 38 restoration project. So in the first installment I popped it open and reviewed it, and now I'm actually going to start doing some work. So here's the chassis that came inside the radio cabinet, and here's the donor chassis. If you recall, it's a damaged part. This coil down here should be attached to the shaft. We can see that over here. And the more I look, the more differences I see. For example, this version, we've got 3 wires coming out here. This, we do not. Maybe they are down below. Oh, I see. They are attached on the other side, and they come out through a hole into a sleeved wiring kind of harness. Whereas this one, there are just 3 separate wires running through it. There's been some recapping done. We got a couple new orange drops and some new mica caps, a few new resistors. But what I don't like is the caps that are most prone to fail, like the electrolytics. Well, there were new ones in here, which I removed as I recall, but these guys are still here and appear to be wired in. And judging by the eagle on there, that would be the original cap. So I really think those need to go out, as does this guy down here. Now I got a lot of useful advice from feedback from my first installment, one of which was to use some good caps, some good filter caps that are rated for pretty high voltage for these 2.4 microfarad filters. Reason being is that, yeah, if you're running at 110 volts, the B+ supply isn't that high, but he suggested that the radio works a lot better if you're running on 220, so perhaps the owner of this radio can get a step-up transformer. Reason being is that if you're running off 220, you get a much higher B+, because this is just a half-wave rectifier off the AC line. So, that being said, for the caps, I got 4.7 microfarad 450 volt plastic film caps. Didn't want to mess around with electrolytics, and I'm not so sure that these aren't some type of plastic film as well. It's hard to say. So I'm noticing these have a lot of I was going to say hot glue, but it kind of feels gooier than that. Some type of modern material, which makes me think that these might have been restuffed. Not this guy, but these other two. Not very authentically looking, though. I mean, it kind of really sticks out. When I do it, I use black or brown hot glue. Not quite so obvious that it's been tampered with. Now this guy, they are a bit different construction. This looks more like the early American electrolytics I'm used to. Well, I shouldn't say early, I should say from the 40s, where it's a cardboard sleeve and then a metal can inside. This guy has a fuse on it too. Don't know if this one does. No, does not appear to have a fuse. Would have gone in down around here. I popped the 2 tubes out for safekeeping. Really got my fingers crossed that this guy is good. This is the rectifier. Got that one, got this one. But that is the only one of these. There's only 2 tubes in this, and this is the one that does all the heavy work. Kind of sounds like there's something flopping around in there. Well, we'll see how that goes. The other thing I did is I searched around online and I found 3 versions of the schematic. All basically the same, just drawn by different hands, I think. Some may be done by hand, some by computer. But they all basically are the same thing. Maybe some slight differences, but they all appear to be pretty similar. So I'll have to choose which one I want to go off of, see which one matches what I'm looking at the best, and go from there. So it's always nice to have a radio that nobody's worked on before. and then ideally it matches the schematic and you can go from there. This has been worked on. I don't know. I can try to use this as a reference model, but I think they are slightly different production runs. For sure the wiring, as I noted, is a little bit different. I spent some time examining the chassis and the work that had been done to it, and I determined that this is the correct schematic, as is this. One of the most telling features is the 500 ohm variable resistor. Both these schematics are the same, they're just drawn a bit differently. This schematic, however, is different. It's probably what the 2 means there, that it's the second revision. They have a fixed 300 ohm resistor. Well, I also compared the 2 chassis, and there are quite a few differences, one of which is this does not have that variable resistor. See that right here on this guy, and this does not have it. Around. And there are wiring differences and there are component differences. So, I mean, even the antenna jack, this one has 4 taps, this one has 3. Perhaps one of them broke off. That I'm not sure about. So, this is not much use as a guide or a reference. And perhaps spare parts, but hopefully won't have to scavenge any. Now, examining the work that had been done, I was able to also identify most of the components on here, which got a little confusing because some of these, whoever did this must not have had the exact values. So, for example, we've got 2 caps in series here, or so rather in parallel, and they're both 100 picofarad, which gives us 200, which I figured must be this guy here. Over here we've got 2 resistors in series, a 1 meg and a 510K. Those, I figure, must be for this guy. Now, one thing I don't know, as I mentioned, is these capacitors. This one looks to me like it's been opened up and then glued back. You can even see the fingerprints embedded in the glue. So I don't know what's in here. Well, I took a capacitance bridge and it measures 10 microfarads, more or less, and it doesn't have leakage up to about 450 volts. So that part's good. And it is polarized, because when I hooked leads up one way, I had a lot of leakage and none the other way. However, I don't know what's in here. I mean, I know it appears to be a 10 microfarad electrolytic that can withstand 450 volts, but I don't know how old it is. I don't know exactly what it was made out of, what temperature ratings, the manufacturer, and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm inclined to do is remove that, and also this one, which I don't believe is the original, because in the original they both were the same value. This one actually says electro, I don't know if it's Polish or Russian or maybe German. Well, it does say DRP on it. Which makes me think it is German, but it's a different style, so I doubt that this is the original. Well, anyways, what I intend to do is take these out, install new caps, keep these with it. If in the future somebody wants to try to pry these open or reinstall them, it'd be my guest, but I want to hand the owner back a working, reliable radio. So what I intend to use is these 4.7 microfarad, 450 volts plastic film caps, non-polarized. They'll work just fine and last virtually forever. I think I was confused about the fuse earlier. This guy has got 2 fuses, plainly visible. Well, this has a fuse as well, but it's in a different location. So continuing my investigation, all the work that's been done seems to be okay, assuming the caps inside these restuffed caps are all right. I also checked for filament continuity between these tubes, and they have filament continuity. So fingers crossed, they still have some life left. So the owner said this radio was working, and then I think he said he might have dropped it or something like that, and it stopped. So I thought, well, physical damage. Well, sure enough, eventually got around to this guy, which is a funky, inexpensive power switch mechanism. It actually switched both sides of the power, one on this side and one on the other side. It does so by, it gets a little sticky sometimes. I'm trying to work some grease onto the mechanism. So it's got this phenolic wafer here with a little brass ball here and a little brass ball there. Well, right now this is the off position. When you put it in the on position, it swings over so that ball is now connecting the top and bottom brass pieces. So open, and ball slides over, closed. But check out this side. We've got the bottom contact, we've got the ball. This is supposed to be closed right now, but look where the other contact is. It's way over here. Upon further inspection, it's tie point for this cap. This whole piece of metal appears to have gotten bent. It should be perfectly vertical right now. And you can see down in there where it's riveted to the board, things seem to have gotten a bit bent, so I think this needs to get aligned more like that, and I may need to use some pliers and kind of really get it forced over, and then clean up these contacts to make sure things are good, and then just get knocked over. I may have to glue this in place because that rivet has now gotten loosened. Now, if I was going to be using this radio on a regular basis, I would not rely on this funky clunky switch. I would just bypass it, maybe use an AC line cord with a inline switch like they use on some modern lamps, or something else. In other words, I would either always leave this in the on position or bypass it altogether, because I just don't think this is going to work very reliably in the long run. But I do believe that, well, it certainly is a problem and a major showstopper, because with that not in the right position, there is no power going to anything and there's no way it can work. So we gotta take care of that. This big guy here, that's the dropper for different line voltages. It's set up for 110, 150, or 225. Well, in the U.S., we don't have any of those. We're more like 120 to 125. Well, this has been completely shorted out. This is doing nothing, so it's set up for the 110, which may run the tube filaments a little hot, but it'd be good for B+. So I've got some advice online, one of which is that the B+, the higher the B+, the better. You get more volume out of this, which isn't surprising, because the more B+, the more power you're going to have going through this, the high impedance speaker. You see, basically, here's your B+, it goes right through the speaker to the plate of this tube, so the more voltage, the more current you're going to have going through that speaker. Anyways, and as far as the speaker goes, so that was another bit of a puzzlement, because there are apparently multiple versions of this speaker, one of which has a pretty noticeable permanent magnet on it, and there's some speculation that that horseshoe magnet might be missing from this one, but no, this is pretty magnetic. So this piece down in here is a magnet. I do recall reading about Alnico recently, which is the alloy used to make more modern permanent magnet speakers. Way back in the day, before Alnico, they used iron, and they were huge horseshoes, and they were not very strongly magnetic. Well, I think Alnico was invented in the 30s, so it is possible that that is what they used on this, and that's why they get away with such a small magnet on it. I didn't start using them in the U.S. until after World War II, but the Germans may have been using them. For example, that's what's in this guy. You know, you don't see any big horseshoe magnet on this. That's because So this is not magnetic, this is just to hold it together. The magnet's all down in here. So, if we compare, this is about the same size. Not quite as magnetic though. So I don't know. Well, down in here, it's pretty strong down in there. So I'm thinking that is not just a plain old iron magnet down in there. Anyways, we shall see when this gets powered up. So I want to do something about that switch. I may just bypass this switch for now to get the radio working, and then we'll see about that. So I'm going to remove this guy, and I've already taken out this one and wire in new caps where I can see the value and know what I've got. The rest of it, I think I'll leave alone. It seems to be fairly recent work, and they use decent quality components. Oh, and I did glue this back together. I just use super glue for now. We'll reinforce this with some 2-part epoxy. But even as it is now functioning. I need to get a little grease on there too. Here's the 3 new caps in place. These are the two 4.7 microfarad, and this schematic calls for a 0.9 microfarad. I put in a 1 microfarad. These are all rated for 450 volts. And it seems oddly appropriate to use Japanese capacitors to repair a World War II era German radio. Also, the leads on these capacitors are pretty beefy, which helps stabilize this point, so this isn't really flopping around so much anymore, and the switch action seems to be working a lot better now. One last thing I want to check is continuity. It's a little hard to see down below, but that is this coil. That is filter choke on the power supply. I want to make sure we've got continuity between that, and if we do, well, I don't see any reason not to pop in the tubes and hook up some clip leads to the speaker and try powering this up. Now I want to be careful, so I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm running it through a Variac, partly for safety for isolation, but also so I can lower the line voltage a bit. This is, remember, rated for 110 volts. And I think I'll throw a CL90 Thermistor in series with this circuit so that it gets a nice slow power up. Thermistor is a device that has a high resistance when it's cold, and as it heats up the resistance it lowers. So it's a common modification on these old sets to add one of these guys in there. It's 120 ohms when it's cold, meaning room temperature, and as current flows through it, it heats up and the resistance drops. Once you hit an amp or 2, it drops to around 3 to 4 ohms. If you're going to have much less current, like say half an amp, quarter amp, you should look at some other devices. These things do have current ratings, like maybe a CO130. Because these really do need to get hot to operate properly, and to get hot you got to have a sufficient amount of current running through it. I'm not sure what the total current consumption is for this, and if I'm reading it right, it's actually a 0.2 amp fuse. So this is a 2 amp device running 1/10 of its full rated current through it. It's probably not the most appropriate thing, but I've got one handy and it'll work well enough for now. If you don't run enough current through it, the resistance is kind of unstable and it can slide around a little bit. You want these to get hot and kind of stabilize. If they're not that hot, the resistance fluctuates and the current through your set will then fluctuate, which is not good. So anyways, I also just checked for continuity in the speaker, and I've got 2,000 ohms, which is exactly what it should be. So plug this in here. I've got this dial to about 100 volts, and I've got this switch in the on position. Hopefully that switch is making contact. I did not bypass it yet. So we should be able to see this tube light up. This one not so much. The outer coating the shield I think it's zinc coating. It's chipped away in some areas, but it's very frosted looking inside. Hopefully it doesn't mean it's gone gassy. It's just a consequence of the way it's made. Alright, so, well, without further ado, let's give this a try. Alright, I do not see any glow. And we are not drawing any current. Which makes me think this switch is not doing its thing. Or this fuse could be bad too. Alright, so I'm going to go through and check for continuity. I may have to bypass that switch. Okay, switch bypass with these blue wires you see here. So I'll be relying entirely on the switch on the variac. So turn that on. And no current draw. Alright, well, one simple thing could be that these tubes aren't making good contact. They use funky sockets, or at least funky to my American experience. Fuse checked out alright. And individually the tubes seem to have filament continuity. Well, I will now have to trace out the wiring and make sure I've got continuity going through the tube. Not much to it. Wrong schematic. Turn this off. Peruse the schematic again. So, AC fuse here. One tube filament, loop down on, other tube filament. This guy's completely bypassed, and we go out. So, there's not a whole lot of things that could be an issue. Basically, we got the fuse, and we got one tube filament, another tube filament, and that's it. So, here's that jumper wire. That measured a dead short, even though the insulation's all falling apart. So, that could leave, obviously, an issue with one of the tubes, or simply a dirty tube socket. And I do have, as I said earlier, another one of these guys. I have not checked the filament for continuity on that yet. Simple enough to do. Okay, I think I may have found the problem. So I checked continuity all the way from the end of the AC plug into the radio. And on one side, no problem. The other side, got really confused. So I came through and I measured continuity to both top sides of the fuse, but then from the fuse to the rest of the circuitry, nothing. Thought, well, maybe there's a break in a wire somewhere, but that seemed unlikely. Then I realized I was checking for continuity by touching the actual fuse itself, not the fuse holder. Well, sure enough, this fuse holder is kind of corroded, and I wiggled the fuse back and forth a few times. You can see the fuse holder is also kind of broken loose. So, like pretty much everything in this radio, it's not the highest quality component. So, hopefully by wiggling that around, well, I checked it with my own meter and I did have continuity. So, hopefully that will do the trick. So, let's try this one more time. Now we have current draw. Not much. Just a brief spurt, but oh yes, look at that. So there's the current draw. When I first turned it on, it shot up to it was barely registering, and it was maybe up to here. Now it's dropped down to just barely anything. And we're sitting at, it's about 105. I'll increase it a little bit. 110. Checking current. Still next to nothing. Ooh. Yikes. But we have some horrible screeching feedback. Huh. I'll move this a bit and it went away. So I had to review my notes on how to actually operate this radio. It's not your normal radio. I do know this is the tuning dial though. And I know that it covers 2 bands and it goes from 0 to 100 and then 100 back to 0, and I don't remember which side of this is the broadcast band. I also don't have an antenna hooked up. Whoa. Hey. It's faint. Play like theremin.
Cubs and Cards at Wrigley 10-6. Cubs still have a lead, though slight now.
It's curious. It's WGN, which just happens to be what I have that radio tuned to in the background.
NBA Finals just getting ready to start.
It is a strong local station, but it seems like it's a little odd. So I wonder if I'm actually picking up something from this radio. So I'm going to turn that off.
And Orlando down the 84th minute.
No, it's still there. Huh?
Check the WGN traffic.
No doubt it would work better if I actually hooked an antenna up to it. But it's kind of cool that I'm picking up anything without one. I'm glad that it seems to be working, because if I had to delve into any of these components, that would be interesting. Unless, of course, I could possibly scavenge from this. Some of these parts, like this guy right here, looks a bit different than this one. So I don't know how interchangeable these parts are. Oh, I just realized the filter choke is completely missing from this guy. Huh. Now on the back of this radio there are 4 jacks, which just happen to be compatible with more modern banana jacks. So plugged one in here. There's an alligator clip on the end, and I clipped that to this blue wire that runs throughout my basement. In other words, a random length long wire antenna. And it hooks up to this. So there's those 4 jacks. So one of them should be ground, and then I guess you pick one of the other 3 depending on what band you want to listen to. Well, I don't know which of these correspond to the ones on the back, so I just picked one at random. I figured one of the ones on the end is going to be ground, so I picked one that wasn't on the end. And we'll see what happens. No, I did not install a thermistor yet, so this long startup time, that has nothing to do with me modifying anything. It's just how long it took this thing to wake up. The tube's starting to light up again. And yeah, boy, this thing does not draw much current, that is for sure. So that 0.2 amp fuse sure does seem to be accurate. Tripod out of the way. Alright, so that 1.5 amp scale, I mean, it's like not even registering. 0.25 amps would be up here. So it's weird. It makes me wonder if this thing's even working right on that low of an amperage scale. Or pole. I don't know, it's weird. I mean, I've used this thing plenty of times, and that current reading has been pretty reliable in the past. Reception doesn't seem to be any better.
drive southbound slows from 8. The turn.
My hand is obviously having a huge effect on the operation of this circuit.
The Indiana is looking good. If you see what it is, give me a call. Let me know about it. The WBBM Pure Sleep Traffic Tip Line number 85.
Okay, I moved it over one, so I believe we're at this tap right now. And, oh yeah, that had an effect, all right.
Cloudy and 82 at O'Hare. Again, heading down to a
It's definitely better now.
60. Starting. Coming up next. Time 8:40. Largest clothing.
I imagine having plastic knobs on this would help insulate me from the radio. Now, I wasn't expecting booming volume from what I've read online, especially when running at the lower line voltage. Don't expect this thing to be booming. But hey, it is working. It's very cool.
2020. It's better than buying one suit and getting 4 suits.
Much stronger station there.
He's getting the advantage of their press.
So what's happening with howling is this is a regenerative receiver. It uses positive feedback to boost the signal that's coming in. So when you get too much feedback, it breaks into oscillation. So by turning this, I'm decoupling these coils so it's not feeding back as much energy to the circuit. So that's like maximum feedback right there. I'm going to back it off.
Because of its location. And I mean, just to be
it amplifies, but not so much that it freaks out.
With Macron was, you know, an absurd sort of standoff, a silly situation there. But the thing that made it the most telling was when they're, you know, down in Sicily. I don't know, we're talking about some different things here. We're talking about NATO stuff and
then we got this control over here.
But when they were down in Sicily, they always take.
I'm not entirely sure I understand.
These events. Whether they're in the Bavarian Alps or on some
I think this also controls the feedback in some manner.
They get out and they physically kind of walk along.
Basically, we've got 3 controls here.
To some extent for image.
One is this, or maybe that's the antenna coupler. Maybe that's this guy.
And they have a chance to interact with one.
And then there's 2 variable caps. That's a variable cap for sure, and I think that is too. So this might actually be the feedback control. And this is coupling the energy in. But what I said still stands. If I couple this strongly, I'm feeding more energy in, and it is oscillating. So, like that, if I back this off, I should be able to.
I got to imagine just simply he just didn't have the stamina.
So basically, I can cause the oscillation or stop it with either one of these controls. One controls how much energy is coming in from the antenna. The other one controls how much feedback is going through the radio.
Literal, you know, if he was a situation where he had.
I was told the best way to operate this is with 2 hands, one on each one of these controls, and adjust them back and forth until you get the best volume.
As an individual, as a person. Like he seems to have like a mental.
So I increased feedback there, and then I backed off the antenna coupling, and I got to stop.
He is worse, and I would argue worse, representative of this country. He seems to think it works in a different way. Well, you're the dominant person in the world, and you have an inferiority complex. It's a bizarre, you know, it's a bizarre.
That seems to be about as loud as I can get the radio to be.
To the heart of the matter here.
You should certainly listen to both if you're sitting near the radio.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about that inferiority complex Donald Trump has, and let's talk about what the implications are now that we see this trip in the rear view mirror. We'll be right back. Sam Cedar, Ring of Fire Radio. I'm talking to the great John Nichols.
watching tips, astronomy news, and much more about the wonders of the universe in Stardate magazine. Subscribe to information at stardate.org. I'm Sandy Wood.
By the fire. Homemade soup and salad dressing?
Not the easiest thing to tune, that's for sure.
It is all about for yourself. Jameson's original
Now open, Yanni's Greek Restaurant at the Glentown Center in Glenview, 2601 Navy Boulevard.
No, I have no way of testing these tubes, especially this guy, so I don't know if the performance could be better if there was a stronger tube put in there. It's getting a little warm, but not super hot. The rectifier's barely warm at all.
Details in a moment, but first to Wrigley Field, the Cubs aiming for a
So there's all specs going different ways, and it's going to be very interesting. I do think it's drug. The only thing that is missing is, did she consent?
Right.
And she's going to say, no, I didn't. And
That's weird. So I'm getting WGN in the red portion of the dial here, which is an AM broadcast station, but we're also listening to a bunch of AM broadcast stations over in this white portion. I'll have to look up to see what bands, what frequency ranges these two dials actually cover. Could be the AM band is split between them.
Beyond a reasonable doubt. If you
States, and right now, 3 points, Kevin Love 22, but it's Steph Curry 22 points.
Well, for sure I'll tell the owner that the radio is working again. He'll be happy to hear that, I'm sure. So, well, what else to do? Well, I want to tidy up a few things, like that AC switch I jumpered out there. Secure that fuse holder, spray some contact cleaner on the two bases and that fuse holder, replace this frayed wire, install that thermistor. I've already cleaned and lubed up the controls, operating very smoothly now.
A plane after flying to Asia with EVA Air. You feel like this. On EVA, you get 5-star service in every class. Board our night flight from Chicago O'Hare and arrive in Asia rested and ready for a new day. Enjoy our comfy economy class seats. Get extra room.